All right, buckle up, everyone, because we are diving headfirst into Cobra Kai Season 6, Episode 8, Snakes on a Plane. This episode picks up right where we left off with the Sekai Taikai, just around the corner. But trust me, things are about to get a whole lot more complicated. We've got relationships pushed to the brink, old rivalries resurfacing, and more twists and turns than a pretzel factory.
Yeah, this episode definitely keeps you on the edge of your seat the whole time. But what really struck me is how the writers are exploring this idea of second chances. We see it with Kenny and Anthony maybe finally burying the hatchet, and even with Chosen and Kumiko reconnecting after all these years. It really gets you thinking about how we all have the opportunity to grow and change no matter what we've done in the past.
Absolutely. And speaking of second chances, let's talk about Chosen and Sensei Kim. I mean, who saw that coming? They go from searching for their runaway students to, battling it out in a Barcelona bar. It's definitely a departure from the serious, almost stoic figures we've seen in previous episodes.
It is. It's a great example of how Cobra Kai manages to balance the drama with some well-placed humor, and it reminds us that these characters have lives outside of karate, and the fact that Chosen and Kim, who were once sworn enemies, can now find some kind of connection, even if it's through a bar fight, says a lot about their personal growth.
Yeah, and I loved how they wove in those flashbacks to Okinawa, especially that iconic scene with the ice.
Yeah.
That added so much depth to their interactions.
Right, exactly. It shows how our past experiences, even the painful ones, can shape who we are and influence our relationships years later. It's like a reminder that we're all products of our past, but we're not defined by it.
Okay, so let's move on to Anthony and Kenny. This whole feud has been simmering since that laxative incident in episode 6, and things really come to a head here.
What I found interesting is how Amanda steps in and really makes Anthony face the music. She's not letting him get away with a simple apology. She wants him to understand the impact of his actions. It's a parenting style I think many of us can relate to.
Definitely. And the fact that it was actually Devin who spiked Kenny's drink throws a whole new wrench into things. It makes you question those initial judgments about who's at fault and reminds us that things are rarely black and white.
Yeah, that unexpected twist opens up a lot of possibilities for Devin's character arc, too. Will she come clean about what she did? How will Kenny react if he finds out?
It's these morally ambiguous situations that make Cobra Kai so compelling.
Totally. And then we have Kenny stepping up to fill Miguel's spot on the Miyagi-Do team. That's huge, considering how much he's struggled to find his place since moving to a new town and getting caught up in the world of Cobra Kai.
It speaks to that theme of redemption we were talking about earlier. Kenny's had a rough time, but he's choosing to take control and align himself with the values of Miyagi-Do. It suggests he's learning from his mistakes and trying to create a new path for himself.
It's definitely a turning point for him, and it sets up an interesting dynamic for the Sekai Taikai. Now we have Kenny trained in that aggressive Cobra Kai style, fighting alongside the more defensive Miyagi-Do students. Right. I'm curious to see how Daniel and Johnny will mentor him, given their own very different approaches to karate. Will they encourage him to embrace his Cobra Kai roots, or will they try to mold him into a more traditional Miyagi-Do fighter? There's a lot of potential for conflict and growth there.
And speaking of conflict, things are heating up on the romance front, too. Miguel's back in the U.S. dealing with Carmen's pregnancy complications, while Sam's attracting attention from a new character, Axel, over in Barcelona.
It's clever how the writers use these romantic subplots to raise the stakes for the tournament. Miguel's anxiety about Carmen and Sam's potential distraction with Axel could definitely affect their focus and performance at the Sekai Taikai. It's a reminder that even the most skilled fighters are vulnerable to emotional turmoil.
For sure. And then there's Robbie, who we see making some questionable choices in this episode, particularly with Zara, considering his past. It's definitely a cause for concern.
The way they're portraying Robbie's struggles with alcohol is really well done. It's both realistic and sensitive. It's a reminder that even the most confident-seeming characters have their demons and that it's okay to ask for help. And Zara taking advantage of him in that state raises important questions about consent and exploitation issues that the show might explore more in the future.
It's a good reminder that while Cobra Kai can be fun and action-packed, it also deals with real-world issues with a lot of nuance and depth. It's one of the reasons it connects with so many viewers.
Absolutely. And speaking of moments that leave you speechless, we can't ignore that cliffhanger ending with Terry Silver. His return was completely out of left field, and it changes the entire game for the tournament.
I know. It's like the writers dropped a bomb and we're left picking up the pieces. Silver's presence just injects a whole new level of uncertainty and danger into everything.
What's especially intriguing is how his return will affect the other characters. Will it force Johnny and Daniel to team up against a common enemy? Will it push Kreese further down a dark path? The possibilities are endless.
They really are. And Before we move on to the emotional roller coaster that was Johnny and Miguel's flight back to the U.S., I want to leave you with this. How do you think Silver's return will impact those fragile alliances that have formed? Will it strengthen those bonds or create new divisions?
That's a fantastic question. Silver's manipulative and ruthless, so, he'll try to exploit any weakness he can find. The next few episodes are going to be wild, and I can't wait to see what happens next. So let's shift gears a bit and talk about Johnny and Miguel's journey back to the U.S. The storyline was just so emotionally charged, it really got to me.
Yeah, it was intense. You could just feel Miguel's anxiety and fear as they were trying to get back to Carmen. Joel Maridueña's acting was phenomenal in this episode. He really nailed that feeling of panic when you're a teenager facing a situation that's way bigger than you.
I think it's interesting how the writers used this whole high-stakes scenario to force Johnny and Miguel to finally confront those unresolved issues they have. I mean, they're stuck on a plane together, literally no escape from those emotions.
Right, it's like a pressure cooker, pushing them to have that heart-to-heart they've been avoiding.
And the way it all leads up to Johnny finally acknowledging Miguel as his son. Oh, man, that was a powerful moment. It felt so earned, so genuine.
I have to admit, I got a little teary-eyed during that scene, too.
Yeah.
Especially the way Miguel reacts. You can tell he's been longing for that validation from Johnny, and to see him finally get it was just so satisfying.
Sometimes all it takes is a few simple words to mend a broken relationship, And the fact that this pivotal moment happens in the middle of a crazy, turbulent flight adds another layer to it. It's like they're both going through their own personal turbulence, and they come out stronger because of it.
And just when you think things are calming down, we get that awesome fight scene where Miguel defends Johnny from that jerk passenger. It's such a great blend of action and character development.
That scene is more than just cool fight choreography. It's a culmination of everything Miguel's learned physically and emotionally. He's not just copying Johnny's fighting style anymore. He's really internalized those lessons about standing up for yourself and protecting the people you care about.
Exactly. You can tell he's not fighting out of anger or aggression like he might have in the past.
Yeah.
It's all about purpose and control. And you can see him channeling all that anxiety about Carmen into those perfectly executed moves.
It's a small detail, but it shows how much Miguel has matured as a fighter and as a person. And let's not forget that perfectly timed back knuckle punch, classic Johnny Lawrence move. It's like a passing of the torch, a symbol of their connection and respect for each other.
Speaking of connections, let's talk about Kenny and Anthony. I was impressed with how they handled that storyline.
Yeah, it would have been easy to just have Anthony say sorry and move on, but the show digs deeper. They explore the complexities of bullying and the long-term effects it can have on everyone involved.
It reminds us that these teenage conflicts aren't just petty drama. They're real emotions and real consequences.
And the fact that it was Devin who messed with Kenny's drink adds a whole other dimension to it. It challenges those initial assumptions about who's to blame and makes you think about why she did it.
It's such a classic Cobra Kai twist.
Yeah.
And it opens up so many possibilities for Devin's character going forward. Will she face any repercussions? Will she try to make things right with Kenny?
It's those moral dilemmas that keep you hooked. There are no easy answers, and it makes you really think about the choices these characters make and the consequences that follow.
I also have to give Amanda LaRusso some credit for being the voice of reason in all of this. She's always there to set those kids straight and guide them towards making better decisions. She's definitely the parent of the year in this episode.
Right, Amanda's role in this episode shows how important strong parents are for teenagers. She's not afraid to lay down the law, dole out consequences, and have those tough conversations that are necessary for growth.
Okay, but let's circle back to the international drama. We've got Miguel back in the States dealing with a family emergency while Sam's got a new admirer in Axel over in Barcelona.
It's a smart way to raise the stakes for the characters in the tournament. Miguel's emotional state and Sam's potential distraction could definitely impact their performance at the Sekai Taikai.
It's like life throwing a curveball, right, when you're trying to focus on a major goal.
Exactly. And with Axel entering the picture, it adds another layer of a complexity to Sam and Miguel's relationship. It's a classic love triangle, but with the added pressure of this international competition and the threat of Cobra Kai looming over everything.
It's like they're juggling chainsaws on a tightrope. The potential for things to go wrong is huge, and you're left wondering if their relationship can survive all this. And speaking of things going wrong, let's talk about Robbie. It's heartbreaking to see him turn to alcohol, especially given his past.
It just shows that even the strongest characters have their breaking points. Robbie's been through a lot, and his coping mechanisms aren't always the healthiest. But the show doesn't shy away from showing the realities of addiction and how difficult recovery can be.
And the fact that Zara takes advantage of him when he's vulnerable, just makes things more complicated. It raises questions about consent and taking advantage of someone who's struggling.
It's a risky storyline, but it could have major implications for both Robbie and Zara. It'll be interesting to see how they deal with the fallout of this and whether Robbie can find the support he needs to get back on track.
Before we get too serious, though, we have to acknowledge the bright spot in this episode. That unexpected but totally delightful connection between Chosen and Sensei Kim.
Oh, their chemistry was undeniable. Who would have predicted that?
I love how their shared history, their mutual respect for karate, and their obvious attraction all come together in this surprising and really charming way.
Yeah.
And that final shot of Chosen riding off on that scooter with Kim, watching him go, pure movie magic.
That scene perfectly captures the show's ability to surprise and delight its audience. It's a reminder that even with all the drama and intensity, there's always room for a little fun and a little romance.
Okay, before we move on to the last part of our deep dive, where we'll break down Terry Silver's return and talk about the upcoming Sekai Taikai, I want to leave you with this. How do you think these characters are going to balance their personal struggles with the pressure of the tournament? Will they step up, or will their inner conflicts sabotage their chances of winning?
That's a great question, and it's something we'll dig into more in the next segment. Stay tuned for more insights and analysis as we unpack the final act of this episode.
So we've talked about all the emotional drama, the complicated relationships, and that shocking return of Terry Silver, but let's not forget what Cobra Kai is all about, the karate. This episode had some incredible fight scenes that really showcase the different styles and philosophies of each dojo.
Yeah, and it's fascinating how the fight choreography reflects the characters' inner journeys. Take the fight between Chosen and Sensei Kim. It starts out so aggressive, almost brutal, but then as they fight, you can sense a change. It becomes less about anger and more about respect, almost like a dance between two masters who truly understand each other.
Yeah, it's like they're communicating through their movements, acknowledging their shared past while building a new connection in the present. And the way they go from fighting to that passionate embrace, it's amazing. It shows how Cobra Kai can blend action and emotion in a way that feels both surprising and totally natural.
Right, and then there's Miguel taking down that obnoxious guy on the plane. It's such a contrast from the impulsive, hot-headed Miguel we saw in the early seasons. He's so controlled and strategic, clearly protecting Johnny. It really shows how much he's internalized those lessons about balance and restraint that Johnny's been teaching him.
It's a great moment for both of them and for us as viewers because it shows just how far Miguel has come since his Cobra Kai days. He's not just copying Johnny's moves anymore, he's using them with a real understanding of their power and purpose.
And speaking of Johnny, his evolution as a father figure is one of the most compelling things about this show. His relationships with Miguel and Robbie are definitely complicated, but in this episode we see him really trying to be there for both of them in his own way.
Yeah, that scene where he opens up to Miguel on the plane was a huge moment. It's like he finally let go of all that defensiveness and allowed himself to be vulnerable to express his love and regret.
And even though he can't fix everything with Robbie, he's still trying. That scene where he goes to the detention center even though Robbie won't see him, it shows how much Johnny wants to make things right.
It's a testament to how well Cobra Kai portrays these flawed, complex characters with empathy and understanding. It's a reminder that we all mess up sometimes, but it's never too late to try to fix things.
And that brings us to the big shocker, Terry Silver's return. It completely changes the game.
It's like a ghost from the past coming back to haunt everyone, and you can feel the tension building as the episode goes on, the way they slowly reveal it, starting with Chosen and Kim spotting that long-haired Cobra Kai guy. It's brilliant.
It's like a trail of clues leading to this massive bombshell, and it leaves us with so many questions. What is Silver up to? How will he affect the other dojos? And can our heroes stop him?
The stakes are higher than ever, and the future of Cobra Kai is uncertain. As we wait for the next episodes, we're left wondering how everyone will handle Silver's return and what it means for the tournament.
This episode has been a wild ride full of highs and lows and shocking twists. It reminds us that Cobra Kai is more than just a karate show. It's about redemption and resilience and the power of human connection.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into Snakes on a Plane. We've covered a lot, but there's still so much to discuss. We want to hear your thoughts and theories about what's coming next in the final episodes of Cobra Kai Season 6. Until then, keep practicing those karate moves. And remember, Cobra Kai never dies.